Welcome to our Screencast, Introduction to Creating a Works Cited Page and MLA Citations. All of this was covered in your class, but we've created this screencast for people who were absent or people who want to revisit anything that we talked about. It's meant to be a resource for you to reference whenever you need to. This screencast is going to have three parts: setting up your Works Cited page in correct formatting, a basic intro to the theory and practice of the new MLA8 citation style, and a short look at the citation quick guide we've put together for you. The first thing we're going to take a look at is a sample Works Cited page. You will have gotten a hard copy of this in class, and we've talked about it. This is a review about page formatting. So this is a basic one that I've typed up as a model, along with some reminders for you. This is meant to be a model for formatting purposes, and you shouldn't count on these being perfect citations for these particular sources. For your Works Cited page, all of your margins should be 1 inch, so you can see it's an inch on this side and an inch from the top. And if we went all the way to the bottom, there would be an inch from the bottom as well, and also the right side. Your font should be 12-point Times New Roman, both in the document and in the header. The header in particular is something to make sure you change to 12-point Times New Roman. Your header includes your name, last name, and page number. If you're in Google Docs, enter down a time so it's not all the way up here on the edge, which is where it defaults to, and then it gets cut off by the printer. There is no MLA page heading over here on a Works Cited page. However, you do have a title, Works Cited. Notice it has an S, not work. There's more than one of them. All of your citations are here in alphabetical order, as you can see: B, C, C, D, H, and W. And we use the hanging indent. Any lines after the first one use a hanging indent of 1/2 inch. One other thing to consider and make sure you check for is that there's no extra spacing between citations. It is all evenly double spaced throughout. You want to be careful that Microsoft Word's default settings do not accidentally put extra space in there. One other thing to be careful of in citation formatting are titles within titles. There's some notes on this sample to help you out. You should reference this as you need them. The type of sources you're using, titles within titles is going to be an issue. Now that we've talked about the Works Cited formatting, let's get into the nitty-gritty of creating the citations that are going on to this Works Cited page. So MLA, you've heard before, it stands for the Modern Language Association. This is the entity that sets and communicates standards for academic publishing. It's true, though, that MLA only covers English and some humanities fields. Different fields have their own standards and expectations. So, for example, if you take Psych, you might have heard of APA, which is the Science and Social Science Standards Organization. These organizations, like the MLA, publish handbooks, and they update them to new versions every few years. The newest version is the one that you see here. It was released in spring of 2016. Now, usually the new handbooks only include minor updates, but this one was a huge overhaul of how things are done. So, for example, they've created a one-size-fits-all citation style as opposed to separate formulas for different types. They've introduced the container concept, which we'll talk about in a minute, and they've simplified punctuation to only include periods and commas, which is honestly kind of nice. Some of the changes they made were because of the frequency of citing electronic sources these days, and even submitting and publishing electronically. The new design allows for some flexibility, which is great for professionals and those working at high levels of education. It does pose some challenge for high school teachers and students who are trying to learn. First, we need to talk about the container concept. So here's a visual for you. This idea comes from the fact that many times sources aren't only published in one place anymore, but they're inside of other sources and then republished again in other places. The container concept allows you to efficiently include all of that information. So, for example, if the tennis ball is our source, say an article, and it was published in a container like the box. If it was an article, it was probably in a periodical or magazine, newspaper, or journal. So you have to give the info about the article, your source, but you also have to give the citation information about that periodical or container it was published in. But then let's say that some publisher takes that article from the magazine and puts it into a book that is a collection of essays on a certain subject. Now you've got another container to contend with. And it's even possible that some company then takes that book and digitizes each piece of it and puts it in a searchable database. Now it's in yet another container that has citation information for your Works Cited page. This can get overwhelming, so here's the short of it. You've definitely got the source itself. Wherever it was originally published, that's container 1. If it was republished in a book, which it may or may not have been, that's container 2. And if it was digitized and you're accessing it electronically, that's container 3. The number of containers that need to go into your citation is dependent on the particular source's publication information. So we'll come back to containers in a second, but for now let's talk about this one-size-fits-all citation format. Each citation includes the same basic info in the same order, as is outlined in the image on the left. But the thing is, not all sources have all of this info. According to this method, if there's a piece that your source doesn't have, you just leave it out. This is where it can get problematic for teachers and students trying to make judgments about what needs to be there and what doesn't. That's why we've given you the Citation Quick Guide, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then, if you have another container or two, you just repeat the process, one right after the other. Before leaving slide 1, I want you to notice the punctuation. All periods and commas. But there are specific places that are required to be periods and specific places that need to be commas. Now the next 9 slides include detailed info about how to cite each element. I'm not going to read these to you, but I will let each slide on the screen for 5 seconds. If you need more time, pause each one and read it, or reference the slideshow handout we gave you. Please note that each of these slides is vital to understanding how to properly do a citation. The fact that I'm not reading them to you does not indicate that you can ignore them. I just have a limit to the length of this screencast. Now that you know about each part in a citation, a reminder about the containers. You just repeat this exact same style for each container, including a period between each one's information. And a reminder that not all sources will have all of these pieces, or will even have multiple containers. It's all dependent on the source that you have. To help with learning this, we've created a citation quick guide that can help you figure out what information you should have for each source. First, however, you have to accurately figure out which type of sources you have, and we've spent some time on this in class. Then you can use the citation quick guide as a sort of template for each source type. A final note, you should build your citations from scratch so you learn what's what and why it's there. Don't use the suggested citations in the database. First, because they're wrong, and we will know that you've copied and pasted without doing the work yourself because we know what's wrong about the suggested ones the database gives you. Also, because you don't know this stuff well enough to look at them and even figure out what needs to be changed. We have to learn to do it before we can take the shortcuts effectively. Now let's switch, before we wrap up, to taking a look at the Citation Quick Guide. You've received a copy of this in class, and it consists of 6 pages that are 6 different templates here for the different types of sources you might be using for this research paper. Each one has a template box set up for you that tells you what info should be included in that type of source and what punctuation to put after each part. There's some notes inside boxes, and there's also some samples at the bottom for each source type. However, you'll need to use this in conjunction with the PowerPoint handout to find out the specifics of how to format each piece of information within the individual citation. This concludes your intro to creating a works cited page in MLA Citations. If you have any questions, you can re-watch anytime or ask me or Mr. Sterner or even Mrs. Strauss in the library.